Captain John Martinez stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty and watched the massive space station grow larger on the view screen. The Galactic Council station was bigger than any human structure ever built. It stretched for miles in every direction, with silver towers and spinning rings that caught the light from 3 nearby stars. Hundreds of alien ships moved around it like insects around a hive. Some ships looked like metal birds with swept wings, while others were simple geometric shapes that defied human understanding of aerodynamics. Martinez had trained for this moment for 5 years, but nothing could prepare him for the reality of first contact with 47 different alien species. Earth had been alone in the universe until 3 years ago when a damaged alien ship crashed near Denver. The technology inside that ship changed everything. Human scientists worked day and night to understand the faster-than-light drive, and within 2 years Earth had built its own starships. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez joined Martinez at the front of the bridge. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had spent 30 years in diplomacy on Earth. The United Nations chose her to represent all of humanity in this historic meeting. She carried credentials from every nation on Earth and spoke 7 human languages fluently. Now she would attempt to communicate with beings that might not even breathe oxygen. Dr. Kevin Thompson stood behind them adjusting his tablet computer. The xenobiologist had studied every piece of alien technology recovered from the crashed ship. He was young for such an important mission, but his understanding of alien science made him essential. His job was to help humans understand how different species thought and behaved. The responsibility seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders. The communication system crackled to life with an alien voice, speaking accented English. Station Control directed the USS Liberty to Docking Bay 7 on the lower ring. Martinez handed control to his pilot and prepared for the most important docking maneuver in human history. The Liberty moved slowly through the approach corridor past alien ships that looked like floating crystals and metal flowers. Docking Bay 7 was enormous and could hold 20 ships the size of the Liberty. Mechanical arms extended from the station and guided the human ship into position. Through the viewports, Martinez could see alien workers moving around in environment suits. Some walked on 2 legs like humans, while others floated or crawled on multiple limbs. The diversity was overwhelming. Ambassador Rodriguez had studied the basic structure of galactic politics during the journey from Earth. The Galactic Council ruled over 47 species across this part of the galaxy. The reptilian Vexti were the most powerful species and had controlled the Council for 3,000 years. They believed in strict social order where each species had its place in the hierarchy. Humans would enter this system at the very bottom as newcomers. The docking process completed and station atmosphere flooded into the connecting tunnel. Sensors confirmed the air was safe for humans to breathe. Rodriguez straightened her formal diplomatic robes and checked that the translation device was working properly. Thompson gathered his scientific instruments while Martinez selected the security team that would accompany them. The airlock opened to reveal their first alien guide. The being stood 7 feet tall with blue-gray skin and 4 arms. Its face was humanoid, but the eyes were much larger and completely black. It introduced itself as Guide Melther of the Andorian Republic and spoke perfect English through a translation collar around its neck. The Andorians were one of the moderate species that supported bringing humans into the galactic community. Guide Melther led them through corridors filled with the most amazing sights humans had ever seen. Beings with tentacles instead of arms moved alongside creatures that looked like walking trees. The air smelled of strange spices and ozone from alien technology. Gravity seemed lighter than Earth normal, and sounds echoed differently in the vast spaces. They passed through security checkpoints where scanners examined their biological signatures and technology. The guards were members of different species working together. Some carried weapons that looked like crystalline rods, while others had devices that might be tools or might be weapons. Everything was alien yet somehow familiar in its bureaucratic efficiency. The diplomatic quarter occupied an entire section of the station with meeting rooms designed for different atmospheric requirements. Some rooms were filled with thick orange gas, while others contained what looked like liquid water. The human delegation was assigned quarters with Earth-normal atmosphere and gravity. The rooms were comfortable but clearly designed by beings who did not fully understand human needs. Ambassador Rodriguez held her first informal meeting with representatives from 12 different species. The gathering took place in a neutral conference room with adjustable environment controls. Each species brought their own translation equipment, and the conversation moved slowly as meanings were clarified. Across vast cultural differences, the insectoid Clethri delegation showed immediate interest in human engineering. Their representative clicked and chirped while asking detailed questions about how humans had developed faster than light travel so quickly. Thompson explained that human adaptation and innovation allowed rapid technological advancement when, given proper resources and motivation. Several other species expressed curiosity about human social structures. The plant-like Verdani wanted to understand how humans could cooperate across different political systems. Rodriguez described the United Nations and how Earth's nations had learned to work together despite their differences. This seemed to surprise many of the aliens who were used to single-world governments. The aquatic Merhai delegation raised concerns about human expansion into space. Their representative spoke through a water-filled breathing apparatus and worried that humans might compete for resources or territory. Rodriguez assured them that humanity sought partnership and trade rather than conquest, but she could see skepticism in their large black eyes as the day progressed. Rodriguez began to understand the complex political situation. The Vextai controlled the Council through a combination of military power and political alliances. They had established a rigid hierarchy where older species dominated newer ones. Humans would face an uphill battle to gain respect and equal treatment. Dr. Thompson made detailed observations of alien behavior and technology. The diversity of life forms exceeded every scientific prediction. Some species communicated through color changes in their skin, while others used complex pheromone releases. The translation technology was impressive, but could not convey subtle emotional or cultural meanings. Captain Martinez remained aboard the Liberty, monitoring Council security forces. Vextai warships patrolled the space around the station in formations that suggested military discipline rather than peaceful cooperation. Their ships were sleek predators with visible weapon systems and armor plating. Martinez counted at least 50 heavy cruisers within scanning range. The first day ended with a formal dinner where representatives from all 47 species gathered. In the Great Hall, the chamber was enormous with environmental zones for different atmospheric requirements. Humans sat at a small table in the standard atmosphere section, while around them beings of every conceivable shape and size consumed foods that ranged from familiar to horrifying. Ambassador Rodriguez felt the weight of representing her entire species as she prepared for the real negotiations to begin. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez woke early on the final day of negotiations feeling cautiously optimistic. The past week had brought steady progress, with moderate species supporting humanity's application for council membership. The Clethri had offered technology exchanges, while the Verdani proposed joint scientific research projects. Even some of the more reserved species seemed willing to accept humans as junior partners in galactic civilization. Dr. Kevin Thompson joined Rodriguez for breakfast in their quarters aboard the station. He had spent the night analyzing data from cultural exchanges, and his findings were encouraging. Most species viewed humans as primitive but harmless newcomers who could be gradually integrated into existing power structures. The translation matrices were improving daily as both sides learned to communicate more effectively. Captain John Martinez contacted them from the USS Liberty with the morning security briefing. Vextai patrols had increased around the station but showed no signs of aggressive intent. The reptilian warships maintained standard defensive formations and responded normally to traffic control instructions. Martinez had orders to avoid any actions that might be seen as provocative, while keeping his ship ready for immediate departure if needed. Guide Meltha arrived to escort Rodriguez to what everyone believed would be the final ceremonial session. The Andorians seemed genuinely pleased that humans were close to gaining probationary membership status. The moderate coalition had worked hard to overcome Vextai objections, and the compromise agreement represented a significant diplomatic victory for species that rarely challenged the established order. The ceremony was scheduled to take place in the Grand Assembly Chamber, where all 47 species would witness humanity's formal acceptance into galactic society. Rodriguez had practiced the ritual responses and studied the cultural protocols until she could perform them perfectly. The signing of the membership accords would make history as the moment when Earth officially joined the galactic community. Thompson remained in the Cultural Exchange Center to continue his research with interested species. The scientific cooperation opportunities seemed endless, and he wanted to establish as many contacts as possible before returning to Earth. Several species had offered to share non-military technologies that could advance human development by centuries. The xenobiologist felt like a child in a candy store surrounded by wonders beyond imagination. Rodriguez walked through corridors filled with representatives from dozens of worlds, all heading toward the Grand Assembly Chamber. The atmosphere felt festive, with beings chattering in their native languages, while translation devices provided running commentary. Even species that had initially opposed human membership seemed resigned to the inevitable outcome, the Grand Assembly Chamber was a massive spherical room with seating areas arranged around a central platform. Each species had their own environmental zone with appropriate atmosphere and gravity. The human delegation occupied a small section in the standard atmosphere area with a perfect view of the ceremonial podium. Rodriguez could see thousands of alien beings filling the chamber in a display of galactic diversity. Chairman Zethkal of the Vextai entered through the main portal wearing elaborate ceremonial robes that marked his status as council leader. The reptilian was over 8 feet tall, with scales that shifted from green to gold in the chamber lighting. His eyes were cold yellow slits that seemed to evaluate everything with predatory calculation. Ancient scars marked his face and hands, suggesting a violent past before his rise to political power. The opening ceremonies followed traditional protocols, with each species acknowledging the importance of the occasion. Speakers praised the wisdom of gradual expansion and the benefits of bringing new perspectives into the council framework. Rodriguez felt pride as several representatives specifically mentioned humanity's potential contributions to galactic science and culture. Chairman Zethkal called Rodriguez to the ceremonial podium to begin the formal acceptance ritual. She walked slowly across the chamber floor, aware that billions of beings across the galaxy were watching through live broadcasts. The translation collar around her neck felt heavy with the weight of representing her entire species in this historic moment. The membership accords lay on the podium in a crystalline case that protected the documents from environmental contamination. Rodriguez had studied every clause and condition during the negotiation process. The agreement granted humans limited membership with restrictions on military expansion and requirements for cultural integration programs. It was not perfect, but it opened the door to humanity's future among the stars. As Rodriguez reached for the ceremonial signing stylus, Chairman Zethkal raised his hand in what appeared to be a formal gesture. The chamber fell silent as thousands of beings waited for the completion of the historic ceremony. Rodriguez looked up at the towering reptilian leader and saw something unexpected in his cold yellow eyes. There was no ceremony or formality in his expression, only calculated malice and ancient hatred. Zethkal spoke a single word in the Vextai language that the translation devices rendered as execute. Plasma rifle beams struck Rodriguez from multiple directions as Vextai guards opened fire without warning. The ambassador collapsed to the podium floor as energy weapons continued firing into her body. The smell of burned flesh and ozone filled the chamber, while shocked gasps echoed from the assembled delegates. The execution lasted only seconds, but felt eternal to the thousands of witnesses. When the firing stopped, Rodriguez lay motionless on the ceremonial platform while smoke rose from her burned diplomatic robes. The membership accords remained unsigned in their protective case, now splattered with human blood. The silence in the Chamber was complete as beings struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Chairman Zethkal addressed the assembly through amplifiers that carried his words to every corner of the chamber. He declared that humanity posed an existential threat to galactic stability and could not be permitted to spread beyond their home system. Any human vessel found outside soul space would be destroyed without warning or negotiation. The Vextai had spoken, and their word was law throughout council space. Vextai security forces immediately began arresting delegates from species that had supported human membership. The moderate coalition that had worked so hard for diplomatic compromise found themselves charged with collaborating with dangerous primitives. Guide Melthor was dragged away in restraints while other Andorian representatives protested their innocence. The purge was swift and thorough as the Vextai consolidated their control. Dr. Thompson watched the execution from the Cultural Exchange Center through live broadcast feeds. Horror and disbelief paralyzed him as he witnessed the murder of Ambassador Rodriguez and the arrest of their alien allies. The xenobiologist realized that his own life was now in immediate danger as Vextai forces moved to secure all humans on the station. Captain Martinez received the execution footage through official council channels within minutes of the shooting. The message came directly from Chairman Zethkal himself, declaring humanity incompatible with civilized society. The Vextai leader demanded that Earth remain permanently isolated within its home system or face the consequences of galactic law. The USS Liberty crew watched their captain process the devastating news that their ambassador was dead and their mission had failed catastrophically. Martinez faced an impossible decision between attempting a rescue that would likely fail or abandoning Thompson to save his ship and crew. The weight of command had never felt heavier as he considered options that all led to tragedy. Thompson prepared for the worst as Vextai soldiers moved through the Cultural Exchange Center. Dr. Kevin Thompson pressed himself against the wall of the Cultural Exchange Center as Vextai soldiers swept through the corridors searching for remaining humans. The xenobiologist clutched his datapad containing weeks of research on alien species and their technologies. The information might prove vital if he could somehow escape the station alive. Heavy footsteps echoed through the complex as reptilian guards methodically checked every room and hiding place. Captain John Martinez made his decision aboard the USS Liberty after watching the execution footage for the third time. Commander Patricia Young stood beside him on the bridge, waiting for orders that would determine whether they abandoned Thompson or risked their entire crew in a rescue attempt. The Vextai had made their position clear, and any aggressive action would be seen as an act of war against the Galactic Council. Young suggested they could use the maintenance tunnels that connected different sections of the massive station. The Liberty's technical team had studied the station blueprints during their week-long stay and identified several routes that might avoid main security checkpoints. The plan was dangerous, but Thompson's knowledge of alien technology made him too valuable to abandon without an attempt. Martinez authorized the rescue mission, knowing it would likely start a war between Earth and the Galactic Council. 4 volunteers from the Liberty's Marine Detachment prepared for immediate insertion, while the ship's engines warmed up for emergency departure. The rescue team carried non-lethal weapons to avoid escalating the situation, but everyone knew the Vextai would respond with deadly force. Thompson heard the soldiers getting closer and realized he needed to move immediately. The Cultural Exchange Center had multiple exits leading to different parts of the station, but most routes would take him directly into Vextai patrol areas. His only chance was reaching the maintenance level where human technical teams had worked during the past week. The xenobiologist gathered his courage and made a run for the service elevator. The elevator descended toward the maintenance level. As Thompson prayed, the Vextai had not yet secured the lower sections of the station. Emergency lighting cast red shadows in the narrow corridor, making everything look like a scene from hell. Alien warning symbols covered the walls, but the translation device around his neck had stopped working properly during the chaos following Rodriguez's execution. News of Ambassador Rodriguez's murder reached Earth through quantum communication arrays that transmitted data instantly across interstellar distances. President Daniel Clark received the report in the Oval Office while meeting with congressional leaders about domestic policy. The president's face went pale as he read the details of the execution and the Vextai ultimatum demanding human isolation. Within the Sol system, Clark immediately convened an emergency session of the National Security Council while similar meetings began in capitals around the world. The United Nations Secretary General called for an emergency assembly to address what many considered an act of war against all humanity. Television networks interrupted regular programming to broadcast the execution footage that the Vextai had transmitted to Earth as a warning. Admiral Susan Wright arrived at the Pentagon within 30 minutes of receiving the alert about Rodriguez's death. The commander of Earth's small space fleet had been preparing for this possibility since the diplomatic mission began. Human military planners understood that first contact might not go peacefully and had developed contingency plans for various scenarios, including hostage situations and outright warfare. General William Hayes joined Wright in the secure conference room where they reviewed humanity's military assets and strategic options. Earth possessed only 12 major warships compared to thousands in the Galactic Council fleet, but human technology had advantages that alien species might not expect. The crash ship near Denver had provided insights into galactic military capabilities and revealed potential weaknesses in their defensive systems. Colonel Ryan O'Brien entered the meeting with preliminary analysis of Vextai military doctrine, based on observations during the diplomatic mission. The reptilian species favored overwhelming force and direct confrontation rather than subtle tactics or unconventional warfare. Their rigid hierarchy and adherence to established protocols might make them vulnerable to unexpected strategies that violated traditional rules of engagement. Thompson reached the maintenance level and immediately heard human voices echoing through the tunnel system. The Liberty's rescue team had successfully penetrated the station's lower levels and was working their way toward his position. The xenobiologist followed the sound through a maze of pipes and conduits that carried power and atmosphere throughout the massive structure. Marine Sergeant Kelly Brooks led the rescue team through ventilation shafts that were barely large enough for humans in combat gear. The team moved quickly but carefully, knowing that Vextai sensors might detect their presence at any moment. Brooks had volunteered for the mission after watching the execution footage and feeling personally responsible for protecting the remaining human on the station. President Clark addressed the nation from the Oval Office 6 hours after receiving news of Rodriguez's murder. The president spoke directly to the camera with controlled anger that reflected the mood of the entire planet. Earth would not tolerate the execution of their diplomatic representative under any circumstances and would hold the Galactic Council accountable for this act of barbarism. The presidential address was broadcast to every human settlement in the Sol system, including the colonies on Mars and the asteroid mining stations. Military recruiters reported unprecedented volunteer rates as young people enlisted to serve in the expected war against alien oppression. Industrial corporations received emergency contracts to convert civilian production facilities into military manufacturing plants. Dr. Helen Chang worked frantically in her laboratory at MIT to weaponize the alien technology recovered from the crashed ship near Denver. The brilliant engineer had spent 3 years reverse engineering Vextai systems and understood their vulnerabilities better than anyone else on Earth. Chang's modifications could turn captured alien devices into weapons that their original creators never anticipated. Thompson finally made contact with the rescue team in a junction chamber deep within the station's maintenance level. Sergeant Brooks immediately began planning their escape route while other team members established communication with the Liberty. The ship was holding position at the edge of the docking bay, ready for immediate departure once the team returned. Vextai's security forces discovered the breach in the maintenance level and began flooding the area with armed patrols. Chairman Zethkal ordered the immediate capture or elimination of all humans remaining on the station. The reptilian leader wanted to send a clear message that humanity's defiance would not be tolerated under any circumstances. The rescue team fought their way through increasingly heavy opposition as Vextai soldiers converged on their position. Brooks used shaped charges to blow through sealed bulkheads while her teammates provided covering fire with advanced weapons that surprised the alien guards. Human military technology proved more effective than expected against reptilian armor and shields. Martinez brought the Liberty to full combat readiness as the rescue team approached the docking bay with Thompson in tow. HFY warships were moving to intercept positions around the station but had not yet opened fire on the human vessel. The captain knew they had only minutes before the situation escalated beyond any hope of peaceful resolution. Back on Earth, the military mobilization continued at unprecedented speed as humanity prepared for total war against the Galactic Council. The USS Liberty burst from the docking bay with Dr. Kevin Thompson safely aboard as HFY warships moved to intercept. Captain John Martinez pushed the engines beyond safe limits while Commander Patricia Young coordinated defensive systems that had never been tested in real combat. Plasma bolts from alien weapons struck the Liberty's shields, sending violent tremors through the hull as the human ship fought to escape the massive space station. Thompson collapsed in the medical bay as ship's doctor Linda Carter treated plasma burns on his arms and back. The xenobiologist had suffered injuries during the rescue but insisted on remaining conscious to provide intelligence about HFY military capabilities. His observations of alien technology and behavior patterns could prove crucial in the coming war between humanity and the Galactic Council. Admiral Susan Wright stood in the war room deep beneath the Pentagon studying holographic displays that showed human fleet positions throughout the Sol system. Earth possessed 230 warships of various sizes, but most were patrol vessels and cargo haulers converted for military use. The Admiral knew that quantity alone would not defeat an enemy with thousands of years of military experience and advanced technology. General William Hayes received reports from manufacturing centers around the world as humanity's industrial capacity shifted into total war production. Factories that normally built civilian vehicles began producing military transports while shipyards designed for commercial vessels started construction on warships based on captured alien technology. The transformation was happening faster than anyone thought possible. President Daniel Clark met with leaders from every major nation on Earth to coordinate the global response to Ambassador Rodriguez's murder. The United Nations voted unanimously to support military action against the HFY, with even traditionally neutral countries offering resources for the war effort. Humanity was united in anger and determination unlike anything in recorded history. Dr. Helen Chang worked around the clock in secure laboratories to modify human weapons with alien technology recovered from the crashed ship. The engineer had discovered that HFY shields were designed to stop energy weapons but were vulnerable to kinetic projectiles fired at specific frequencies. Chang's modifications allowed human railguns to penetrate reptilian defenses that had protected them for centuries. Colonel Ryan O'Brien established the first human military base outside the Sol system on a dead planet in the Volf System 30. Light years from Earth, the Colonel's advanced team used stealth ships to avoid HFY patrols while setting up supply depots and communication relays. The base would serve as a staging area for attacks deeper into Council space. Captain Amy Rodriguez volunteered for the most dangerous missions after learning that her sister Lisa had been murdered by Chairman Zethkal. The younger Rodriguez was a skilled pilot who commanded a squadron of modified fighters designed for deep strike operations. Her ships carried Dr. Chang's new weapons along with biological warfare agents specifically designed to target HFY physiology. The first major battle occurred at Kepler Station where HFY forces expected easy victory against primitive human technology. Commander Jake Morrison led an assault fleet of 50 ships using tactics that violated every rule of civilized galactic warfare. Human vessels attacked supply lines and civilian infrastructure rather than engaging in honorable fleet battles. That the aliens expected, Morrison's forces targeted the station's life support systems and power generators instead of fighting the heavily armed HFY warships directly. The humans used hit-and-run attacks that confused alien commanders who were trained for formal battle formations. Within 6 hours, Kepler Station was evacuated and destroyed despite being defended by superior numbers of enemy vessels. The psychological impact of humanity's unconventional warfare proved as devastating as the physical damage. Vextai military doctrine assumed that all species would fight according to established protocols that had governed galactic conflict for millennia. Humans ignored these rules completely and attacked whatever targets would cause maximum disruption with minimum risk to their own forces. Dr. Thompson's intelligence reports revealed critical weaknesses in Vextai communication networks that human cyber warfare specialists could exploit. The reptilian species used quantum entanglement systems that were supposedly impossible to hack, but human computer programmers found ways to inject viruses that caused system-wide failures. Alien fleets lost coordination and began firing on their own ships during the confusion. Captain Rodriguez led her stealth squadron deep into Vextai territory to destroy production facilities that manufactured military equipment. The human pilots used cloaking technology reverse-engineered from the crashed alien ship to penetrate heavily defended systems without detection. Rodriguez personally destroyed 3 major shipyards before Vextai forces realized they were under attack. General Hayes coordinated simultaneous strikes across 12 different star systems to prevent the enemy from concentrating their forces against human attacks. The strategy required precise timing and flawless communication, but succeeded in dividing Vextai attention across multiple fronts. Alien commanders found themselves fighting battles on planets they had never heard of against enemies who appeared from nowhere. The biological warfare weapons developed by Earth's scientists proved particularly effective against reptilian physiology. Human research teams had studied Vextai genetic samples obtained during the diplomatic mission and created targeted viruses that attacked their immune systems. Entire alien garrisons fell sick within days of exposure, leaving their positions defenseless against human ground forces. Colonel O'Brien's forward bases expanded rapidly as human engineers adapted captured alien technology to build fortifications that could withstand massive bombardment. The engineering corps used modular construction techniques that allowed defensive positions to be assembled in days rather than months. Vextai forces found themselves attacking fortresses that seemed to appear overnight and previously empty space. Admiral Wright coordinated the overall war strategy from her command ship while monitoring reports from dozens of battlefronts. Human forces were winning individual engagements, but the Vextai still possessed overwhelming numerical superiority. The Admiral knew that humanity needed to strike at the enemy's political center before reinforcements could arrive from distant parts of the Galactic Council. The moderate alien species that had supported human membership watched the war with growing amazement and fear. Several council members began secret negotiations with Earth representatives, hoping to avoid humanity's wrath while positioning themselves for the post-war galaxy. The Clethri and Verdani sent encrypted messages offering intelligence about Vextai military positions in exchange for protection from human retaliation. Chairman Zethkal grew increasingly desperate as human forces systematically dismantled the military infrastructure that had maintained Vextai dominance for 3,000 years. The reptilian leader issued increasingly frantic orders to his generals demanding that they stop the human advance at any cost. Traditional tactics were failing against an enemy that refused to follow established rules of warfare. Captain Martinez returned to Earth with Dr. Thompson's intelligence and immediately began planning for the final assault on the Galactic Council's home system. The Liberty had been damaged during their escape, but the ship's crew was eager to participate in the climactic battle that would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. The war was approaching its decisive moment as human forces prepared to strike at the heart of alien power. The final assault on the Galactic Council homeworld began 18 months after Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez's murder, with Admiral Susan Wright commanding the largest human fleet ever assembled. 500 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation while smaller vessels spread out to encircle the heavily defended planet. The Vextai had concentrated their remaining forces to protect their capital, but human intelligence suggested the reptilian military was already broken beyond repair. Captain Amy Rodriguez led the first wave of fighters through the outer defensive perimeter, using stealth technology that made her squadron nearly invisible to alien sensors. The pilots had trained for this moment since the war began and carried weapons, specifically designed to penetrate the most advanced Vextai shields. Rodriguez felt her sister's presence guiding her as she targeted the command bunkers where Chairman Zethkal directed the desperate defense. General William Hayes coordinated ground forces that landed on 3 different continents while the space battle raged overhead. Human soldiers used powered armor and energy weapons that gave them significant advantages over reptilian infantry, who still relied on traditional military equipment. The engineering corps had prepared for this assault by studying captured Vextai installations and developing tactics specifically designed for urban warfare on the alien homeworld. Dr. Helen Chang's technological innovations proved decisive as human cyber warfare programs crashed the planetary defense network within hours of the initial attack. The brilliant engineer had spent months analyzing Vextai computer systems and discovered vulnerabilities that allowed complete system penetration. Alien weapons turned on their own forces while communication networks transmitted false orders that created chaos among the defending troops. Colonel Ryan O'Brien led elite forces in a direct assault on the planetary capital where Chairman Zethkal had fortified himself with his personal guard. The colonel's Marines used underground tunnels to bypass surface defenses and emerge directly beneath the government complex. Human forces fought room by room through corridors filled with desperate Vextai soldiers who knew their empire was collapsing around them. President Daniel Clark monitored the battle from the White House Situation Room surrounded by military advisors and diplomatic representatives from allied human colonies. The president had authorized total warfare against the Galactic Council but hoped the final victory would lead to lasting peace rather than endless conflict. Earth needed to establish dominance without destroying the foundations of galactic civilization. Commander Jake Morrison's fleet engaged the last major Vextai naval force in orbit around the homeworld while transport ships landed human occupation forces on the surface. The space battle was fierce but brief as alien commanders realized their weapons could not penetrate human shields that had been upgraded with captured technology. One by one, the reptilian warships surrendered or were destroyed by superior human firepower. Dr. Kevin Thompson worked with moderate alien species to establish communication channels that might prevent unnecessary bloodshed during the final assault. The xenobiologist had become humanity's leading expert on galactic politics and understood that some council members had been forced to support the Vextai against their will. These species could become valuable allies in the post-war galaxy if they were treated with respect rather than conquered. Captain Rodriguez fought her way through the government complex following intelligence reports that placed Chairman Zethkal in the Central Command bunker. The reptilian leader had refused all surrender offers and continued directing resistance efforts despite the hopeless military situation. Rodriguez carried a plasma rifle taken from a Vextai soldier and felt grim satisfaction that she would use alien weapons to avenge her sister's murder. The underground battle was savage as human. Marines encountered Vextai elite guards who fought with desperate fury, knowing that defeat meant the end of their 3,000-year empire. Colonel O'Brien's forces used shaped charges to blast through reinforced doors, while portable shields protected them from alien energy weapons. The fighting moved deeper into the complex as defenders fell back toward the final defensive positions. Admiral Wright received surrender offers from Vextai fleet commanders who realized continued resistance was pointless. The reptilian military had been systematically destroyed over 18 months of warfare and lacked the resources to mount effective defense. Human forces controlled space around the homeworld and could bombard surface targets at will while alien weapons remained ineffective against advanced human technology. Captain Rodriguez reached the command bunker where Chairman Zethkal waited, with his remaining bodyguards in a chamber filled with tactical displays showing the collapse of Vextai power throughout the galaxy. The reptilian leader stood over 8 feet tall, wearing ceremonial armor that had been damaged during the fighting. His yellow eyes showed no fear, only cold hatred for the human who had come to kill him. The final confrontation lasted only minutes as Rodriguez fought through the bodyguards to reach the alien leader who had ordered her sister's execution. Zethkal wielded an energy sword with skilled precision, but human reflexes and advanced armor gave Rodriguez decisive advantages. The chairman died as he had lived through violence and domination, but this time he was the victim rather than the perpetrator. Colonel O'Brien secured the government complex and established communication with human forces throughout the planet as organized Vextai resistance collapsed. The reptilian military command structure had been built around absolute obedience to the chairman, and his death left surviving commanders without clear authority. Most alien units surrendered rather than continue fighting a war they could not win. President Clark addressed the galaxy from the former council chambers, announcing the establishment of a new democratic federation based on species equality rather than hierarchical domination. The old system that had oppressed weaker civilizations for millennia was officially abolished and replaced with institutions that protected individual rights regardless of species origin or technological development. Dr. Thompson became humanity's first galactic ambassador, working to establish peaceful relationships with former council members while ensuring that Earth's dominant position remained unquestioned. The moderate species that had secretly aided humanity received favorable treatment in the new order, while former Vextai allies faced occupation and reconstruction. Programs designed to eliminate their aggressive tendencies, General Hayes implemented. Demilitarization programs for species that had supported the old regime while helping defensive civilizations modernize their forces to protect against future threats. The galaxy learned that humanity would protect those who deserved protection, but show no mercy to oppressors who threatened innocent beings. Human military bases were established in strategic locations to maintain peace and prevent the rise of new tyrants. The war's end established Earth as the undisputed galactic superpower, with human colonies spreading rapidly across former council space. The murder of Ambassador Rodriguez became a turning point in galactic history when humanity announced its arrival not as supplicants seeking acceptance but as conquerors demanding justice. The new galactic constitution included the Rodriguez Doctrine, declaring that any attack on human diplomats constituted an act of war against all humanity. Admiral Wright became the first supreme commander of galactic defense forces, while human flags flew above government buildings on hundreds of worlds. The species that had killed a human envoy discovered too late that humanity's response to injustice was not negotiation but total victory that reshaped civilization across the stars.